at this point, me as a consumer and also reviewer is really confused with what's Cza and Cca been doing. I mean, they keep on releasing new items that actually are not really different from one another, and usually when Cza have done a big hit with their product, Cca does the similar Iems, and like the KZZ-EX with their magnetostatic, and then the Cca releasing their NRA, and then the KZ releasing the EDX Ultra, and then the Cca Cra Plus from the Cca side. It's so confusing. There's a lot of things happening here. And hello and welcome to Aftersound Review. I'm gonna review for me 5 of their latest product maybe, and what's the difference and which one should I recommend. Okay, here we have the KZ EDX Pro at around $14 US, and then KZ EDX Ultra at around $20 US, KZ EDA Balanced, which costs around $39 US for the pack, and then Cca Cra $14 US, and then Cca Cra Plus, which costs $28. And just like usual, I will break down this review from the build, fit, frequency response, sound, and comparison. Build quality wise, actually they are all very similar, just difference. The main difference is more on the faceplate that they are being used. Starting from the KZ EDX Pro, they're using this translucent plastic, and you get this kind of circle faceplate that has a KZ logo on it. And then going to the KZ EDX Ultra, same circular faceplate here, but it's more in golden color and it has different pattern on it. And then the KZ EDA has much more different looks. It has this triangular shape frame, while the faceplate itself is mostly translucent. And the Cca Cra is like this. Again, it has a translucent part, maybe only around a quarter from the faceplate, while the others is completely covered in this more metallic material. While the Cca Cra Plus is exactly the same with the Cca Cra, it just has this golden color, but mostly they are all made of plastic and shiny and also translucent part. In terms of fit, I think they are all very similar to one another. So even though I'm using the left side using the KZ EDX Pro, while the right side is using like the EDA or something, it's not that different because they have very similar dimension and shape. But the main difference that I feel when I'm using them is mainly thanks to its different material that is using in their default stock tips. For example, like this EDX Pro and also the EDA, both have similar KZ EARTIPS that has some kind of pattern, grind pattern, as a star pattern around the edge of the shape of this EARTIPS, while the other, like the EDX Ultra and also the Cca Cra, both have more rounded shape. It doesn't have that star pattern compared to the EDX Pro. Personally, in my ears, they both feels quite the same. But the main difference that I find is from the Cca Cra Plus. You may see that even the shape itself is more like umbrella compared to the others that has more rounded shape like mushroom. It's more like umbrella, and also it has the most translucent ear tips, and also it has the most soft ear tips amongst them all. And in my ears, it got the best fit, but it's mostly thanks to its default stock tips. Other than that, I think they are all pretty similar to one another. Looking at the frequency response alone, I think like there's a story to be told here. It's like there's a different and also improvement little by little from the old KZ into the old KZ or Cca. Starting from the KZ EDX Pro, it is still the one that is the most similar to the older generation of KZ, like the KZ ZSN Pro or the KZ EDX and the KZ ZS10 Pro. It's the most similar to the older generation of KZ, which is you could see that from the upper mid-range to treble area, it's the most hills and mountains. And going to the Cca Cra, I think this is like the new generation of KZ. It has much more tamer upper mid-range and also more focused in more of the sub bass, giving less mid bass and also more extended treble. And for me, this is a really good change from the Cca Cra. And then after the Cca Cra, they are split into two. The KZ EDX Ultra, it's like the more toned down bass from the Cca Cra, and also but a little bit more extended treble, a little bit more presence in the higher treble. And then the Cca Cra Plus is simply a tamed down Cca Cra. It has less sub bass and less upper treble. And then after that, there's the KZ EDA Balance, which I consider to be like the more toned down version again from the Cca Cra Plus. That has less mid bass even, and also less upper treble. It's like there's a story here. Okay, when it comes to the sound, I have tried them using my sources, and yeah, they are pretty much easy to drive. You could drive them using your phone only. And for me, the EDX Pro is the most different one, so I'm gonna talk about that first. The EDX Pro is the most V-shaped and harsh one, to the point that I hate it the most. For me, it's simply the worst of the bunch. It has this much boomier bass compared to the others, and also the upper mid-range to the treble area is the harshest and not as balanced as the other. But Actually, maybe if you are a bass head, you will like this the most, because simply it has the most punchy and thick kind of bass. But actually, in terms of clarity, in terms of the speed of the bass and control of the bass, it is simply the weakest here. The upper mid-range is shouty and harsh, so any kind of vocal, it sounds quite thin and not refined, and the treble is simply harsh. I really don't like hearing cymbals from this KZ EDX Pro, because after KZ EDX Pro, there's Cca Cra, which I consider to be like the new generation of the KZ or Cca. It sounds definitely different, and compared to the EDX Pro, the sub bass is more lifted, but the mid bass, it has less mid bass. So in turns, that the Cca Cra has less thickness from the bass, but it's deeper. It's going deeper than the EDX Pro, and also the vocal is definitely more balanced in the Cca Cra compared to the EDX Pro. That's very clear. And also, even though the vocal is more balanced, but it has also smoother, and not only smoother, but also more extended treble. So when you're hearing percussion, especially in the high notes, and also cymbals crash in some orchestral tracks, it is much cleaner, and also you could hear them much better in the Cca Cra after the EDX Pro rather than the EDX Pro. So for me, I just gonna forget about the EDX Pro. It's not as the tune wise, it's not as same league as the Cca Cra. And after the Cca Cra, I have to admit though, the Cca Cra, sometimes I feel that the bass control is not really good either. So in some tracks it could get a little bit boomy and slow. But after that, the Cca Cra, you could have find two ways of upgrading. In the EDX Ultra, it's like a more tamed down Cca Cra, but somehow more forward upper treble. So in the returns, you get that a little bit of sizzling happening in the upper register, even though it's not as spicy, I would say, as spicy, as not as punchy as the Cca Cra. But if you want a true tamer Cca Cra while maintaining the sub bass and also treble wow effect, for me, I would suggest you to try the Cca Cra Plus. because the Cra Plus is simply a toned down Cra in terms of that bass. It's lowered down a little bit in the quantity, but somehow for me it turns out to be the more balanced one. So, but it's still fun. So when I hear EDMs, when I hear pop music, it will still I get still that fun factor from the Cra Plus. And the mid-range is mostly quite similar, but the treble is less metallic and also less pronounced than the Cra. It's less forward too, so it's actually safer from sibilance and metallic timbre. The Cra is more metallic and more boomier in the bass. The Cra Plus is the more balanced version of the Cra. And the KZ-EDA, even though I should say it's the most balanced one, it has less mid bass rather than the Cca and it has the most controlled bass. But at the same time, the KZ-EDA is also, maybe I could say, the least exciting one in the bass area. So maybe for bass heads might prefer the Cca Cra or maybe the KZ EDX Ultra rather than this KZ-EDA. But for me personally, I actually prefer the bass from the KZ-EDA. And also the treble area, it's not, again, it's like the smoother and tamed down version of the Cca Cra Plus. So KZ-EDX Pro is like the most V-shaped one, and then changing to the Cca Cra, it's like the more U-shape. You get better extension on both ends and also tamer mid-range. It's more controlled in the mid-range, but you get that more of a extension both on the lower notes and also the high notes. But after that, some people might be thinking that it's too much, so they lower it down a bit. It becomes the Cca Cra Plus. It's simply a more tamed down version of the Cca Cra. But after that, maybe some people want simply something more balanced, and there you get the KZ-EDA balance. And actually, when it comes to KZ-EDA, you got 3 Iems in the pack. You get the KZ-EDA bass, you get the KZ-EDA balance, and you get the KZ-EDA high resolution. But for me, actually, from the 3 itself, the most noteworthy is only the KZ-EDA balance. The bass one is simply too bassy, and the high ones, high resolution ones, for me, it's the high frequency rather than high resolution, because it has more forward treble that resulting in somehow a drier sound. So just note, just buy the KZ-EDA balance and maybe a happy notes. As far as I know, the KZ wants to release the KZ-EDA in itself, and so that's it. I think the comparison of them all, the KZ-EDX Pro, it's simply, maybe if you are a bass head, you want the thickest bass, but it has the boomier one. It's the most bleed to the it has the most bleed to the mid-range in the bass area. You might be still wanna try that EDX Pro, but for me, actually, I really enjoy the next generation starting from the Cca Cra. It has this kind of, at that price point, and let me tell you, at around $30 and below, Cca Cra is the most like the U-shape, but you get really high treble and also really good sub bass. It feels really complete in terms of frequency range, but yeah, you still get a little bit of that boominess in the bass and also that metallic treble sometimes. And if you still like that kind of music, you still like that kind of tonality, you still like that kind of sensation, but you want it to be toned down, for me, if you ask my recommendation, forget the EDX Ultra, buy the Cca Cra Plus. It sounds more harmonious and it's more balanced for me compared to the EDX Ultra. And after that, if you still want somehow more balanced signature, go buy the KZ-EDA. So yeah, they are all different, and I hope you enjoy this review. And if you have any question, please write down in the comments below, because trust me, this choice is kind of confusing. Yes, again, because KZ and Cca keeps on releasing new stuff that actually doesn't really change, doesn't really have a lot of difference in them. Okay, that's it. See you next time. Bye bye.